Welcome to the Dietitian Side Hustle podcast. My name is Katie Dodd, and I'm a nutrition entrepreneur. I spent 7 years as a side hustler before diving into entrepreneurship full time. Before making the leap, I was bringing in 6 figures through my side hustle. If I can do it, you can too. This podcast is for dietitians, interns, and students who want to be inspired to start or perfect the side hustle of their dreams. Let's do this. Welcome to the 223rd episode of the Dietitian Side Hustle podcast, The Gap and the Gain. Hello, my friends. I feel like it's been a minute since I've had a solo podcast just to talk to you guys. Lots of really fun episodes, lots of interviews. But gosh, it sure is nice just to have a chat in one of these podcast episodes. Now, the one today, what I want to talk to you all about is a book that I recently read that I thought was incredible. So you guys know I like to read. A practice that I have that I do every single day, like brushing my teeth, like getting dressed, all the things, is that I read 10 pages of a professional development book every single day. And this helps me for lots of reasons. It helps me to finish books. I don't know about you guys, but I used to buy books and I'd start reading them and then life would life and then I would not finish them. So it helps me to finish the books, but also these books, they build up my mind, my spirit, all the things that I need to continue to build my confidence, build my business, do all these things that I know serve me. Now, I do listen to books on Audible and I will read the real copies, but this particular book, I didn't listen to on Audible. I read the real deal. So where this journey kind of started was my business coach sent me this book called 10X is Easier Than 2X. It is a lovely book as well. And in it, they were talking about this concept of the gap and the gain. And I learned that this was about another book. So after I finished 10X is Easier Than 2X, I purchased The Gap and the Gain. Now, if you want to find any of the books that I'm talking about, you can always go to katiedodd.com. This is my Linktree page, and in there you'll see my Amazon storefront. I am an Amazon influencer, so when you click on the Amazon storefront, this is kind of some curated boards that I've made, and there's one that is full of books for entrepreneurs. You will find The Gap and the Gain in there. You'll find all the other books that I have read, and I'm always adding more to that. So if you're looking for some good books on professional development, personal development, mindset, all the things, go check out there. But this book, The Gap and the Gain, it is written by Dan Sullivan. It says that at the top, but actually it's really mostly written by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Dan Sullivan is the founder of Strategic Coach. It's a really big coaching company. And Ben Hardy is someone who works under him who has really crushed it with creating these amazing books that, I know that he does collaborate with Dan, but they're mostly written by Ben Hardy, and they are incredible. So I want to talk to you about this book. I'm going to kind of paint a picture to kind of understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the gap and the gain, and then I'll kind of introduce some of the concepts in the book. Now, I will tell you what I love about this concept is that it helps me not just in business, but also in a lot of other areas of my life, including being a better mom. So when I find a book that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, I'm like, I need to tell all my friends on the podcast. Now, I know that this is a podcast and you're not seeing like the book itself. So I'm going to be describing some things and hopefully I paint good pictures for you. So hopefully this all comes across good. In my head, it's going to be great. Hopefully it comes across that way. So I want you all to imagine for a moment that you are not a runner. And you might be like, that's easy to imagine, Katie, because I am not. But if you are a runner, imagine you're not. So you are not a runner. You've never run before, and you heard about this really cool thing in your community. It's a challenge to run a mile in 10 minutes. It's coming up next month, and you're like, I could do that. That sounds totally fun. So you get off the couch and you start running. You start practicing. At first it's rough, but you practice every single day, and finally it is the day. So you have a mile in front of you. You are at the starting line. You got the finish line a mile later, and there's a timer on the clock for 10 minutes. You start racing. You start going. You start out fast. You slow down. You try to pace yourself, and then all of a sudden you hear that ding. You hear that ding that the 10 minutes is over, and you realize that you are not at the finish line. You are about 75% of the way from start to finish. So if you imagine kind of a line in front of us, start line on one side, finish on the other, and you're 75% of the way, stop sign right there because you can't go any further because 10 minutes is up. You made it 75% of the way. So my question for you, how do you define the success of what you did? Do you look at the distance you went from the start to where you stopped, the 75%? Do you look at that and see success? Or do you look at the distance between where you are and where the finish line is and look at that and see failure? Now, this concept is the gap in the gain, and I'll explain it in more detail. But if you're looking at the fact that a month ago I was just sitting on the couch, I was not even a runner, and now I just ran 3/4 of a mile in 10 minutes. This is amazing. Look at the distance between where I started to where I finished. This is success. I did it. You're living in the gain. But if you're the person, which honestly, this is probably most of us, who looks at the distance between where you were and where you wanted to be, you're looking at the gap. You're looking at what you didn't do. You're looking at it as failure. You're looking at it as, man, I should have never even got off that couch. I should have never pursued this dream. What was I thinking? All of those negative thoughts get in your head. You're living in the gap of what you didn't achieve. Now, I hope that picture kind of helps as we are having this discussion, but there's a really cool graphic in the book that I can't show you on a podcast, but I'm going to break it down. So this graphic has kind of like 3 different bubbles. At the bottom, it has start. At the top, it has ideal. In the middle, it has achieved. So imagine this as start. You're starting a goal, you're starting a project, you're starting something, and the ideal is where you want to be. Let's break this down in like 90 days. Here's where I am now. In 90 days, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to have accomplished. This is the goal I want to meet. This is what I want to do. The middle bubble is achieved. So this is the actual, in 90 days, what you achieved. So thinking of the race, right? The start line, the finish line, and where you ended. This is the same concept. Now, if we are living in the gap, what we are measuring is the distance between what we achieved and what we hoped to achieve, that ideal, the gap that we didn't achieve. If we are living in the gain, we are measuring from where we started to what we achieved. We're looking at what we actually gained, what we actually did. Now, I don't know if you're like me at all, but I'd never thought of this before. Now, I'm a big dreamer. I set goals that are so big, honestly, sometimes I don't even reach them anymore. But the question is, are we looking at what we've done or what we failed to do? So if you're living in the gap and you're only looking at what you accomplished based on like, I didn't meet it, I failed, I didn't do enough. Well, gosh, that's going to lead to a lot of negative emotions. You're going to feel like a failure. You're going to feel frustrated. You're going to feel disappointed. You're going to have really low self-esteem. You might feel guilty. You might start feeling like really down on yourself. And living in the gap is not a way to live because you're just constantly discouraged and your brain's beating you up and you feel like I'm just not good enough. I wanted to achieve this thing, but I didn't. Gosh, I suck. Why are you going to want to continue if that is the way you feel? It feels horrible, right? And, I think one thing that we always have to remember is that it's not over until it's over. Just because you didn't achieve it doesn't mean you won't. It just means you haven't achieved it yet. And if you're only looking at the gap, the distance between like, oh, I didn't do it, I suck, how is that going to make you want to continue on to actually achieve it? That's going to make you just want to stop because you're like, these emotions suck. I'm almost better off not even doing the thing than feeling like this. Where if you're living in the gain and you're really focusing on, you're measuring your success based on where you started to where you are now, you're going to have a lot of positive feelings. You're going to feel like, yeah, I succeeded. I crushed it. You're going to be satisfied. You're going to have more confidence. You're going to have a higher self-esteem. It's going to be enjoyable. You're going to be optimistic. You're going to be like, gosh, look at what I did. Yeah, I'm not at the ideal yet, but I'm going to keep going and I know I'm going to do it. So the question is, where are you living? Is your brain going to the gap or are you living in the gain? Now, for me, so much of my own mindset journey is just about awareness. It's about learning tools like this, like the gap and the gain, and just being aware. So what I want you guys to do after listening to this podcast is I want you to continually ask yourself, am I in the gap or am I in the gain? What am I measuring? Am I measuring what I missed, the mark I missed, what I didn't achieve, or am I measuring what I've done and what I've accomplished? But I want you to think about this in several different areas, okay? Now, of course, I want you to think of this in terms of your business, in terms of your side hustle, in terms of your big goals in business. But there's other things too. Are you living in the gap or the gain in your regular job? A lot of you are side hustlers, and so maybe you have a job. Are you constantly in the gap of like, they haven't given me a raise, they're not paying me enough, this totally sucks, and you're just feeling really negative because you're seeing the gap versus the gains of, you know what? this is a job that's paying the bills right now. There's opportunities in this job that are going to help me in my side hustle and in my businesses. What about relationships? Are you seeing other people in the gap or the gain? And this one actually hit me as a mom because, I know many of you are parents who listen to this podcast. Some of you aren't, but I'm sure you could always imagine too. But what I realized for myself is I have this expectation, this ideal of how I would like my kids to behave. But then we have the reality of how they do behave as tiny humans whose brains are developing and they're trying to figure out the world around them, right? And so I had this realization when I was actually getting frustrated at my son. My son and my daughter were bickering, and I had this ideal of, I want you two to get along. I want you two to be respectful to each other. And it's so easy to measure them in the gap of this is how I want you to act, but this is how you're acting, and seeing them in this, this frustration spot, this disappointment of like, oh my gosh, you guys, why are you getting into it again? Versus seeing the gain, seeing where they started and how far they've come, looking at their whole situation, looking at, they're being turkeys, but they also have a lot of moments where they're being real kind. And so it really helped me as a parent to be like, am I seeing my children in the gap or am I seeing them in the gain? And what area am I parenting from? Am I parenting from the gap of the expectations I have of my kids, or am I parenting from the gain of seeing them as these amazing little humans who are just doing great at life? Now, you could also measure the circumstances you're in. Are you measuring your circumstances as the gap or the gain? Are you in a situation where maybe something negative's happened? Maybe something positive, but usually the negatives get to us more, right? Maybe it is you lost a job. Maybe you have a health diagnosis. Maybe someone you love passed away. Maybe something happened that's really traumatic and really hard. Are you seeing life? Are you seeing circumstances in the gap or the gain? Are you seeing a situation of like, this is what I wanted life to be like? And it's so freaking hard, and I didn't expect this. Like, this is not what I wanted to achieve at this stage in my life. Are you seeing your life in the gap? Or are you seeing the gains of what you've done, of what you've accomplished, of what's happened? And even though you might be going through things, there's still beauty in it. What about your big dreams? Are you seeing your big, audacious goals that I always encourage you guys to have as the gap or the gain? Are you looking at what you didn't accomplish, or are you looking at what you did? Are you setting small goals because you're so worried about that gap mentality of like, and I hear this all the time that people say, set your goals small enough so that way if you don't reach it, you'll at least feel good about yourself. But I'm like, that's playing it way too small. I don't teach that philosophy. I teach dream big. Set crazy audacious goals that even if you don't reach it, you're probably still going to be like 10 stages above the small goal that you intended to make. But we have to make sure our mindset's right. Because if we're gap thinkers and we set big, audacious goals that we can't meet, that's going to lead to a lot of negative emotions. Whereas if we are gain thinkers, we're like, I'm getting closer, I'm getting there, I'm crushing it, and I am going to achieve the things because I am not going to give up. Oh, so again, I want you guys to continually ask yourself, where am I living? Am I living in the gap or am I living in the gain? How am I looking at things with business, with my job, with my side hustle, with my relationships with people, with others, with the circumstances that life has dealt with, the circumstances I'm in, with the big dreams that I have? Now, the reason I want you to continually ask yourself this is because it impacts how you live. It impacts how you move forward, because if you're always in the gap and you're feeling frustrated and angry and disappointed and sad, that's no way to live. I want you guys to have joy and happiness and silliness and just joy in the life you're living in. And so much of our life is how we choose to see it. Circumstances happen, but we give meaning to it. Is the meaning that we're giving to it negative or positive? And I'm not saying just be all toxic positivity, but really focusing on, where am I measuring success in my life? In the gap or the gain? And the reason I wanted to share this message with you guys is because I just have this like weight on my heart and this constant reminder of the fact that we only get one life. We only get one life. And I want to make sure that you make the most of this one life we get to live. Regardless of your circumstances, if you have yet to achieve the ideal, if you're still working on things, if life is hard, I want you to find joy and happiness right now. Joy and happiness is not a destination. It's not later. It's not tomorrow. It's not once this happens. It's not once this happens. It's finding it right now in maybe the chaos that you're living in. Even when it comes to pursuing side hustles, I often tell you guys the time is now. We think that we'll wait until life gets less crazy. We'll wait until things are calmer, when I've got more money, when I've got more time, when I'm a little bit more calm, when this has happened. But the truth is that life continues to life. It's a phrase I've been using a lot lately. Life keeps lifing. We talk about this in the mastermind too. But I want you all to focus on the gain moving forward. And I would really encourage you all, if you have a chance to get this book, The Gap and the Gain, it is so good because it's just a small, tiny shift on how we see things. And once we get in a space that we see the progress when we're in the gain, it's going to help us in every area of our life, including side hustles. It's going to help you get started. It's going to help you continue. It's going to help you do the next thing and have joy in the process. So that's all that I had for you guys today. I hope that this all came off well and that it was clear to understand. But gap in the gain, where are you living? Be mindful. If you're in the gap, catch yourself and focus on those gains. So thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you want to find out about more of the ways that we can work together, go to katiedodd.com. That is my Linktree page. And I will see you guys next week on the podcast. Bye, guys.